Hello, this is Dr. David Wilkinson, and in this module we'll be talking about broccoli and the crucifers. We're looking at the crucifer family, research on the subject, how it works and the chemistry, preparation, dose, and then summarizing the key points. Well, the crucifer family is also called Brassica, and there are a lot of vegetables in this group. Some of these you'll be familiar with, others are less commonly used depending on where you're living. But the ones that we're all very familiar with are broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and cauliflower. It also includes Asian greens like bok choy, salad vegetables like rocket, also some things that you use in smaller quantities such as mustard, wasabi are also in this family. And a lot of work has been done on some of these vegetables, so let's see what sort of studies we have that indicate that they're helpful against cancer. The first one is a laboratory study looking at I3C, which is from broccoli. It's indole-free carbinol, but we're going to call it I3C. And in this study, the volunteers took a supplement of I3C every day for 3 months. At the end of that 3 months, they had a blood sample collected. Then they went on and had a placebo, another apparently a supplement but nothing active within it. And this was taken for a second period of 3 months, after which they had more blood collected. So these blood samples were obviously kept separated, and then they applied the blood samples to colon cancer cells in the laboratory. So all they've done is they've taken a broccoli type supplement. They've then taken a blood sample from that person and applied that blood directly onto cancer cells. And the findings were quite amazing, really. The proliferation of cancer cells was decreased during the period when they were taking the supplement compared to when they were taking the placebo. So just think about it. If you take this particular vegetable, you have blood which, when applied to cancer cells, actually stops them growing. Wouldn't you like to have blood like that in your veins? Look at this Shanghai breast cancer survivors sub-study. In this one, over 4,000 breast cancer patients were followed for a shortish period of 3 years, and they looked at the amount of crucifer vegetables being consumed. They took the highest quartile, so the top quarter of consumption versus the lowest quarter, and they compared those groups. And they found that the ones that ate the large amounts had a 5% survival benefit. So this is actually people dying from cancer in this first 3 years was reduced by 5% just from eating crucifers. This study looked at bladder cancer. Once again, we're following patients with cancer, 239 of them in this case, followed for 8 years, and during that time nearly half of them died. And they then assessed the broccoli intake from those people, looking at how many serves of broccoli were taken per month. So all they had to do was take more than 1 serve per month to demonstrate a reduction in the risk of death from bladder cancer. In fact, over this period, those who took more than 1 serve a month, on average they took 4 serves a month, that's only 1 serve a week, their risk of dying from bladder cancer was reduced by 20%. Well, how does it work? There are 2 main phytochemicals or plant chemicals that have been studied with regard to crucifers. One is sulforaphane, the other is I3C, as we just mentioned. They both serve to detoxify and promote apoptosis. Remember, this is programmed cell death or cell suicide of cancer cells. Sulforaphane in particular is an antioxidant by stimulating the glutathione system. It also blocks angiogenesis, which is the ingrowth of blood vessels to cancer, and it blocks stem cells from renewing themselves. It also inhibits cancer cells from migrating through the tissue. Indole-free carbinol has some overlap, but in particular it has these hormonal effects. It blocks estrogen and synergizes or works with tamoxifen, which is an estrogen blocker. It also blocks androgen receptors, which is important in prostate cancer. And let's look at this estrogenic effect of I3C. There are two ways it does this. One of them is that by shifting metabolism to favor good estrogen. So the standard type of estrogen is E2 or estradiol, and it gets converted to E1. But there are two types. One is 2-hydroxyestrone and the other is 16-alpha-hydroxyestrone, and the 2-hydroxy is considered the good one. So it's a fairly weak stimulator of estrogen receptors, whereas the 16-alpha has a strong effect on estrogen stimulators, quite similar to the estradiol. So if we can weaken estrogen, that's an advantage in protecting people from estrogen-sensitive breast cancer. And I3C shifts the metabolism in that direction. It also blocks the estrogen receptor directly. The chemistry is quite fascinating. I'm sure you'll enjoy this little tour, really. Glucoraphanin in broccoli is converted to sulforaphane, and glucobrassicin is converted to I3C. So the glucoraphanin and glucobrassicin are in the broccoli cells. The myrosinase is an enzyme which is also in the cells, but it's kept separate from the glucoraphanin and brassicin. So it can't interact, it can't convert it until the plant is crushed and they come into contact with each other. So the products are sulforaphane and indole-3-carbinol. And the secret is that myrosinase is heat sensitive. So if the broccoli is boiled, for example, if it's overheated, then the myrosinase is damaged and we don't get any of the conversion into sulforaphane. Also, we do need to chew it well, because the myrosinase, as I said, is separate from the glucoraphanin in the cells. To get these two mixing together, we need to break the cells apart by chewing them well. So the myrosinase is preserved by not overcooking it, and then it's brought into contact with the precursor by chewing it well. Preparation is critical in this context. As I've said, heat destroys myrosinase, but if it's lightly steamed for just 5 minutes, then the myrosinase is preserved and we get plenty of sulforaphane. Alternatively, broccoli can be stir-fried briefly and even microwaved, as long as the proper guidelines for microwaving are followed. But boiling it for just 10 minutes reduces the nutrients by 50%. Now, some people have been saying that broccoli is better taken raw, but the problem is that there is another enzyme. So myrosinase is an enzyme that causes a conversion, and there's another enzyme or an enzyme cofactor called ESP, epithiospecifier protein. And this converts glucoraphanin as well, but it doesn't convert it to sulforaphane, it converts it to sulforaphane nitrile. This is a nitrile version of the sulforaphane, and this one has no anti-cancer effects. And when we eat broccoli raw, the ESP is still active, and so we get too much of this SF nitrile. ESP is heat sensitive like myrosinase as well, but it's more sensitive, so it can be destroyed just by a small amount of heating, whereas the myrosinase is preserved. Just 3 minutes of heating gets rid of the ESP, so we don't get any sulforaphane nitrile, but going for beyond 3 minutes is okay, because the myrosinase survives that. As long as we don't go for more than 10 minutes, then we'll get plenty of sulforaphane being made by the myrosinase. So in summary, if it's raw, we get less of the SF and too much of the nitrile. If we heat it a little, we get the right amount of SF. If we heat it too much, then we get less of both of them. And this is a cute little illustration from Akiko Nakazaki, who's a PhD student in Japan. And what this shows is that the box on the left is the broccoli cell, and the glucosinolate, the glucoraphanin for example, is in one compartment and the myrosinase is in another compartment. They're kept separate. But when the plant is damaged, in this case it's being eaten by an insect, but for us it would just be crushing or chopping it, these two compartments are broken open and the key chemicals come together, but as you can tell, this caterpillar isn't cooking his leaf, he is eating it raw. That means that the ESP is present, and it's going to convert the glucoraphanin into the nitrile. And guess what? Nitrile is like an insect repellent. So this whole process is built into the broccoli plant in order to protect it from insects. Now, morosinase is lost if it's overcooked. It's also lost if the product has been frozen, because usually when they prepare these, they are flash cooking it or blanching it, which helps with preservation. And unfortunately, that's killing morosinase as well, isn't it? If you find it very convenient to eat frozen food, morosinase can still be added back in by adding other crucifers. In particular, mustard, wasabi, winter radish can be added into the frozen broccoli, and the morosinase in those will do the conversion just the same as if it had come from the broccoli itself, as long as those things themselves haven't been damaged by processing. Broccoli sprouts are another option. These contain 20 times as much SF as broccoli, and perhaps this is because small plants need more protection than the large one. Remember, the purpose of this for the plant is to protect itself from consumption by insects, and little ones need more protection. However, these also have the ESP in them, and because people like to eat sprouts raw, it's better if you wait 5 days, because by that time the ESP levels actually have reduced in sprouts, and so we don't have the problem we were just talking about. Whereas at 2 days there's still plenty of ESP present, and we're getting the nitrile version. So if you were having it at that time, you'd want to cook it lightly to get rid of the ESP. And don't eat broccoli seeds, because the erucic acid in them is considered unhealthy. So here we have the broccoli sprouts showing off, saying, I've got more SF than you. But the mature plant, sure, it's true, has less SF, but it has more of the I3C. And I3C is important for estrogen sensitive breast cancer. So for those people, it's good to have the mature broccoli plant as well as the sprouts. Now, we should be looking for fresh broccoli with tight florets. It shouldn't be limp and breaking apart. It should be a dark green or purple color, but not yellow. And washing, you might think that broccoli is a problem because it looks as if plenty of pesticides could be hiding in amongst the irregular surface of it. But in actual fact, on the list of vegetables which are contaminated by chemicals, broccoli is one of the cleaner ones. So it can just be simply rinsed. For those of you who'd like to wash it a bit better, this can be done in salty water or vinegar for 5 minutes, and that will do a good job. How much should we have? Well, the good thing is that broccoli, the phytochemicals, the plant chemicals from broccoli are absorbed very well. So it quickly reaches good levels in the blood, through to the urine, and also in other tissues such as the breast tissue. And this means that we can achieve the levels we want with sensible servings. And in those studies we talked about, just 3 to 5 servings per week works well. It was even less in that bladder cancer one, but 3 to 5 is a good number to aim for. This is where 1 serving is half a cup or 4 florets. And remember, broccoli sprouts have a lot more SF in them, so the equivalent would be only about 10 grams or less. And it's to be steamed for 5 minutes, chewed well and enjoyed. Don't worry about safety issues. Broccoli doesn't have any side effects or problems. It does contain vitamin K, which is good for most of us. In fact, it doesn't have as much vitamin K as kale or spinach, for example. But the problem with vitamin K is for people who are on the blood thinning medication warfarin, because the vitamin K can block the function of warfarin, and people in that situation need to be careful and have their blood tested and get advice. There's also concern expressed about blocking of thyroid function by so-called goitrogens, and crucifers are on that list, but in actual fact this is very, very unlikely to be a problem in humans. It's really only an issue if there's marked iodine deficiency, and even then you'd need to eat huge amounts for it to matter. So the key points are that broccoli is the king of crucifers, but the others have anti-cancer effects as well. Broccoli is best steamed for 5 minutes and then chewed well to activate the nutrients. Sprouts are potent, but mature broccoli has advantages against breast cancer. And 5 servings a week would be ideal, although even less is beneficial. The outcome of this module is that you now know the members of the crucifer family, how crucifers work against cancer, how to prepare it, and how much to eat.